Thank you, everyone. Morning. We're just about getting started. So, thank you. Good morning again. I know the last two times I stood behind the lectern, I said we're just about getting started. No, we're really just about getting started. You know, one of the most unforgiving things about speaking first on the agenda is that I don't have the luxury of saying all protocols observed. I have to actually set the protocol. And we know how that goes. It's always a lose-lose situation. You get blamed for mispronouncing people's names. You get blamed for acknowledging lesser important people than more important people first, right? So I thought to myself, why not have the assistance of AI this morning? So there's a camera behind me, and if you take a look at the camera, it will scan everyone's faces in this room, and within 3 seconds, it will list the protocol for me. So then if anything goes wrong, I can blame the AI, right? So if you'd indulge me for a second and take a look at the camera, you will do that in just about 5 seconds. It's right here. Gotcha. It's not going to happen. The fact that you did look tells me that you are as excited as I am for the use of AI in our society. And no doubt, we're going there, and we're getting there quite in short order. And that's the essence of why we're here this morning, no? To engage each other in this very important topic of artificial intelligence in our society. That is no doubt changing the way we live and the way we interact. So I will attempt establishing protocol. Dr. Elizabeth Béjar, Provost of Florida International University. Welcome. Mr. Brian Fonseca, the Director of the Jack D. Gordon Institute here at FIU. Dr. Madeline Pumariega, the President of Miami-Dade College. Dr. Mike Allen, President of Barry University. Dr. Prasant Mohapatra, Provost at the University of South Florida. Mr. Ernie, could you pronounce your surname for me? There you go. Director of Cyber Florida. Mr. Peter Singer, Senior Fellow at New America. Members and representatives from Florida State Legislature. Members of the Summit Steering Committee. Professors, all, a pleasant morning. Good morning. Thank you. It is definitely my pleasure to commence this Florida's inaugural AI Policy Summit. It has been long in the planning and in the making. The summit was born out of an urgent need to engage stakeholders to convene and discuss our state's future amidst the proliferation of emerging technologies such as artificial intelligence. And therefore, your presence here this morning really matters. Without further ado, I will invite Mr. Brian Fonseca to bring greetings and remarks.
Up until now, I had never considered the idea that it was possible that Donavon might be a machine, okay? But after that opening, I have some questions for you afterwards. See what the algorithm is. No, good morning, everybody. Welcome to the inaugural Florida AI Policy Summit. I'm Brian Fonseca. I direct the Institute for Public Policy here at Florida International University. And I also serve as the executive director of FIU's emerging preeminent program, Cybersecurity at FIU. And again, this is a point of departure. It's not a destination. The spirit of this convening was to bring an intimate group of thought leaders together to have impactful conversations about the trajectory of policy in the state of Florida. As you can imagine, AI is impacting positively and negatively, or challenges and opportunities, every single facet of society. Every business vertical is going to be touched by AI. Governance is going to be impacted. Public services, workforce, you name it, AI is going to have such a pivotal, if not tectonic, impact on just about everything that we do going forward. I had the opportunity to brief the House of Representatives State Legislature last week, where we had really thoughtful conversations about a series of new legislative initiatives that are hitting the state that deal with AI. And we expect that this particular session, you're going to see a lot of things that hit the floor that talk about how to think with respect to guardrails around AI in the state. And so Florida is now in a position where it has to reconcile with the massive impact that artificial intelligence is undoubtedly going to have. And they need to start thinking about the kinds of guardrails that need to be put in place to ensure equitable, accountable, reliable artificial intelligence for both private, public sectors, in the state. When you think about sort of the spirit of this convening, like I said, it was really designed to bring an intimate group together, thought leaders that can talk about some of the impacts. We have a couple of fantastic panels set up to parse things like AI's impact on economy, AI's impact on society, how are we thinking about governing AI, adoption, adaptation of AI. And so we have some thoughtful panels in the afternoon. We're going to start off with a panel from our higher ed leadership that's going to talk about what higher ed is doing to embrace AI, not just in terms of pedagogy in the university, but also how are we preparing the future workforce? How are we thinking about the reskilling of the workforce to ensure that the workforce is prepared to take on those roles in the next decade as AI continues to sort of make its impact on just about every facet of society. So discussion in the morning. The afternoon is going to comprise a series of workshops where we have put together a series of position papers that we want to flush out, and then we want to get those position papers out to our legislators and out to the community to provide feedback on. In partnership with those of you in the room, and again, I'll give a special shout out to Cyber Florida at University of South Florida for being such a key partner, Miami-Dade College, our work with Barry, our work with University of Florida, in putting together a series of position papers that will help inform responsible and accountable AI legislation for the state. I'll end with this, and I thought this was a little bit alarming, and I think the course correction is coming. But when you think about the number of initiatives that have gone before the state legislature over the last 5 years that deal with AI, there's only been 7. And of the 7, only 2 have actually passed. And that tells you where we sit. Now, when you think nationwide, we're not that far behind. Most of the states in the union are struggling with putting reliable, responsible AI legislation in the books. But last year, we saw a massive surge, almost 200% increase in the number of legislative initiatives that went before state legislatures, and only about a dozen of those, 200, were signed into legislation last year. So you're going to see this surge going forward, and I think it's our responsibility as a thoughtful community to help influence and shape the policy that our state is going to take on. And so with that, I'm gonna pivot to a real honor that I have in introducing a friend, a colleague, someone I've had the opportunity to work with for a number of years, who is probably one of the top thought leaders on AI, not just in the nation, in the world. He's a New York Times bestseller. The title I love to brag about is he's named as one of the top 25 mad scientists for the U.S. Army. So I find that to be one of the most fascinating. He was named one of the top 100 futurists by Foreign Policy magazine. And so without further ado, Dr. Peter Singer.
So first of all, thank you for that incredibly kind introduction. And it's been a just wonderful, I want to say, partnership, friendship with Brian and his team and the larger organization at FIU over the years, between myself as an individual, but also our organization up in DC, New America. I also want to add in another thanks, which is for getting me out of DC. If you've been looking at the weather, we've been hit by 2 snows and another one this morning. So it's great to be down here, although I understand I need to watch out for falling iguanas is something to dodge. So let's jump into it. I was asked to essentially speak to you, set the scene for what comes next in this space of AI and robotics. And I think I'd like to start off by making a point about where have we been coming from. What is so remarkable about this moment that we're at right now is that it's a moment that we've been talking about might happen literally for thousands of years of human history. Now, they didn't call it AI in Greek mythology. They called it a talos. In old Judaic texts, they called it a golem. If you're a science fiction person, we've been talking about this moment as machines become more and more intelligent for well over a century. The first original term for it was a robota. And now we're living through it. But I think what's so important is to remember that we're only at the start of this. By any kind of measure, this is the hottest area of not just policy discussion, but of course, business and research. It involves all the leading governments of the world, whether it's the United States, whether it's China, all the leading corporations of the world, whether it's traditional tech companies, a Meta, a Baidu. It also involves companies that we wouldn't think of as AI companies, but they are. For example, McDonald's bought up an AI startup because it sees AI as the key to the future of fast food. That notion of a startup, I think, is very important. The founder of Wired magazine said, quote, "I think the formula for the next 10,000 startups is to take something that already exists and add AI to it." Now, so what then comes next out of all of that? And to make a little bit of a copy off of this, and I think this is going to be a pattern in a lot of speeches to come, I asked an AI, okay, what comes next? And as you can see here, ChatGPT decided to break it down into 12 different fields that range from automation to innovation, education to transportation. Now, obviously, it's just kind of regurgitating back what humans have written in some way, but I still think it is a pretty good summary, right? But what's notable to me is to not think of this as making something better, advancing, but rather how it unlocks new patterns of thinking, not just for the machine, but for us. So this unlocking, I asked it in a different way. Okay, talk to me about the fields where there's going to be new approaches that are unlocked. And you can see it's thinking about new approaches in everything from real estate to convening events to education. Third issue. I think it's important to go back to that narrative that we've long had about robotics, and it still hangs out there in both the science fiction, but bluntly in too much of the policy world, which is this notion of the robots are going to come against us, the robot revolution. It's bluntly something that if you wanted to get funding for in universities, there's literally billions of dollars for exploring. To me, that is an avenue that's not all that fruitful. Instead, we need to understand the revolution is more like an industrial revolution. And there's all sorts of different studies on this. Oxford University looked at 702 different job types and found that over the next generation, 47% of them will see some kind of redefinition, drastic reduction, or complete replacement. That's not overall jobs, that's professional types. The IMF came out a couple of days ago, and they looked at overall jobs, and they said 40% on a global level. PricewaterhouseCoopers found that it was 38%. I don't know who's going to be right, but whatever it is, that is substantive. But fourth, we need to understand that industrial revolutions are more than just about jobs. The director of MIT's Media Lab described it this way, quote, "Every area of life will be affected, every single one." And think about the last industrial revolution. There were positives and negatives of historic and literally landscape-changing scale. It affected everything from work to warfare to the climate itself. It led to new kinds of politics. On the positive, if not for the last industrial revolution, we would not have workers' rights, women's rights, children's rights. Oh, by the way, it also gave us the ideologies of fascism and communism. And we're about to go through an equivalent of that kind of industrial revolution. Fifth point to make, a big part that comes out of this is that every single organization, whether you are a national government, a military, a university, a business, is that you now have two types of questions that you have to wrestle with. The first is, what is possible that was not possible for my organization before? And then there is a second type of question that's the thornier type of question. It's what is proper? It's issues of right and wrong. And it might be the right and wrong way to teach, research, to fight, or it might be legal, ethical, right and wrong questions that we haven't wrestled with before. I do work with the military. In my career, we've gone from saying robots, we'll never ever have them, to just a couple of months ago, we had the first autonomous robot deployed into warfare. And oh, by the way, it was deployed by one of our allies, so we were kind of cool with it. But this is a pretty big moment when you step back and think about it. 6, among these questions of what is possible and what is proper is one that's, I think, central, but not central enough in our discussions. And again, this is whether your organization is Amazon, the military, or a university or a business, whatever. The question is this: what is our vision of not just merely the technology, but our relationship with that technology? There are roughly 3 different approaches to your relationship with the technology. They're related, but they are fundamentally different. And essentially, you have to choose. One is it's an advisor. It suggests courses of action in everything from what movies to watch, and if you're Netflix, even what movies to produce. That's why we keep seeing the same people in the same storylines. To if you're in the military, it's advising you on battle management, where to deploy your forces. A second approach is no, it's an extension. It extends my reach, whether I am doing surgery, education, delivery of logistics, or delivery of weapons. Apologies, I should have said earlier, there's 4 approaches. Next approach, it's a partner, it's a wingman, it's a teammate. It's working alongside me, whether it's working alongside me in a lab, a warehouse, or I'm a cop, or I'm out there, I'm a fighter pilot. And then there's the final approach, which is no, it's a representative of me. It's my agent. And then, of course, that agent can be bundled together into like a swarm and then have an agency of its own. And again, these are very different approaches. And if you are Amazon thinking about logistics, or you're the US military thinking about collecting information on the battlefield, or you're a hospital, whatever it is, these are very different approaches, and they lead to very different possibilities in everything from how should I train my people to what kind of systems do I need to buy. 7th issue. We need to understand that it is yielding new questions of morality and law and policy, of course. That happens with every single technology, whether it was the technology of the steam engine, to the computer, to the airplane. You always get these new questions. But what we need to understand here again is they're questions that we've never had to wrestle with before. And they basically fall into 2 categories, I would suggest. One is machine permissibility. What should our ever more intelligent, ever more capable machines be allowed to do? And then there is the question of machine and human accountability. Who owns them? Who owns the fruits of what they produce or gather? Who owns the responsibility for the consequences when things go wrong? And, as said before, I do a lot of work with the military, and this is a big issue. What happens if a machine kills the wrong person? And you mean like all the people already killed by Teslas? And that's my point of that, illustrating that these questions play out everywhere from not just the battlefield to the highway to, again, whether we're thinking about in the classroom, you name it. 8, as we wrestle with these questions, we also have the issue of who should decide. In many ways, it was easier in the past because we deferred most of these questions to government. If you were thinking about arms treaties as an example, governments decided. Now we have, I would say, positive notions of everything from a more active, vibrant civil society to public-private partnerships, to the understanding that different in the past, much of the research and knowledge is coming out of the private sector or the university. But again, that opens up some really tough questions, right? So if we're thinking about who adjudicates, who decides this, should it be governments? Well, which governments? Should it be organizations? Which kind of organizations? Even if you're thinking about what's the role of business, should it be businesses that are publicly held or no? Should it just be single individual-led businesses are the ones that get to decide because they were lucky enough to have been the right dorm mate of someone back at Stanford 25 years ago? My point of this is that what to decide is sometimes easier than who gets to decide. So what can we do? A couple of pathways that I would suggest for all of us. Again, whether you are leading a business, leading a university, leading a military. 1, understand that there's no stopping these, not just the technology, but these questions. The technology is coming and the questions are coming. And we need to stop the showy, false efforts to somehow stop it or slow it down or let's take a pause while we're at the very same time accelerating forward. That's for show. And all it does is actually slow us down. Instead, focus on what do we, what do you, what does your organization want? What would success look like? And then use that as our guidepost. For myself, and I think for governments, and I would argue, organizations, again, whether they're businesses or universities, I think a proper goal is to reach what you might think of as assured autonomy. And assured autonomy has essentially 2 meanings. One is systems that are going to be more and more autonomous, more and more intelligent, that we can rely on. But second is the notion of assurance in that it's both a future that we think is likely, but it's also the sense that we are getting the future right. So it's both about the machines, that destination, but it's also about us. Third, a key pathway to reaching that end goal is the field of education. And education at not just the kids level, but all the way up to the senior leader level. We don't have time to just kind of, the next generation will get this right. And unfortunately, the data shows that there are several leadership gaps in terms of awareness of these issues. It's a little bit dated, but there was one survey of several hundred American leaders, and they asked them, what do you think is the most important new game-changing technology out there? And 91% of them responded AI, hence policy summits like this. They then asked them, how well do you understand AI? And 17% said, I get it. Now, you all work with leaders, they're pretty self-confident people. So it probably wasn't actually 17% that get it. But even if that's accurate, that's a big delta between 91% saying, this is really, really important, and 17% saying, I get it, right? And so that's on all of us to try and close those gaps. Fourth, talent management. Every single organization should be rethinking its approach to talent management. Not just how am I going to use AI in my talent management process, but rather what does it mean for it? What does it mean for everything from who do I recruit? How do I train them? How do I think about assessment, promotion? That's a comprehensive difference. And again, too much of the discussion is like application of AI into talent management rather than what it means holistically for it. Fifth, and Brian hit this, we need to catch up our laws for this new world. I am biased, but I actually think the US military has been a leader in this. It's definitely been a leader compared to Silicon Valley, as opposed to the model of just pushing the technology out there and beta testing on the world, or single individuals saying, I know it all for everyone. The model that they took has essentially a five-part process. One, they convene experts from a variety of fields, not just technology, but across multiple fields. Second, they utilize scenarios to explore these issues of possibilities, perils. They look at it in different contexts, from different angles, different point of views. From that, third, they lay out core principles that the gathering can agree upon. And then it uses those core principles as a way to reach out to the core stakeholders, industry, allies, partners. And then finally, those principles, those stakeholders, that's how you get people to agree on to policy and law that's both realistic and more likely to be accepted. Is it perfect? No, but I do think it is better than kind of the cacophony that we have going on right now, or as Brian laid out, sort of the vacuum in certain areas. And so in closing, the key takeaway that I'd like to leave you with as you move forward in the discussions today, but also as you think about your own role as leaders in your organizations, is on one hand, it's not just the excitement that we very much should have about this amazing technology and all the wonderful prospects and applications of it, but it's also, daunting, all these questions that come out of it. That is a balancing act. But the real takeaway is to understand that meeting with success is going to be more than about just executing the technology the right way. It's going to be about ensuring that our work is constantly trying to face and forthrightly face the possibilities and the perils, the issues that loom ahead of us. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Peter, for those astute words, eye-opening in many respects. And as you spoke, I recall 2 years ago when I decided to take on to myself this task of writing a book, and it was on cryptocurrency and public policy and administration. And I had the steepest task of convincing the reviewers that it was worth talking about cryptocurrency, cybersecurity, and those things adjacent to issues of public governance. And fast forward to today, when I'm authoring another book on cybersecurity, it wowed me as to how the conversation had progressed, such that it was quite apparent how these two things intersected. And so this summit is very timely in convening not only the perspectives of those technical minds around artificial intelligence and other emerging technologies, but also the minds of people who govern in these spaces, right? Because as I tell my students, any piece of technology is less about the technology and more about people. It's how we govern, it's how we make decisions about these things, and it's how we come to the agreed consensus as to how we will move forward with these new technologies. Because believe it or not, it's what we put in that we'll get out, right? And it's about how we advance the conversation to the point where we demystify the misconceptions and the narratives, the conspiracies around how technology is used. And we emerge better for it in the long run, yes? And so I see Randy is giving me the wrap it up. So without further ado, I will turn over to Ernie. He's the director at Cyber Florida, and he will moderate this panel. Ernie, your show.
And so our panel this morning is talking about the impacts of artificial intelligence on higher education. And we have a wonderful panel here this morning. Again, some very senior leaders from across the educational space here in Florida. And so we're just kind of going to, I'll let each one of you introduce, because I don't think I would do you justice. So we'll start right here.
Good morning, everyone. Madeline from Pumariega, Miami-Dade College. President. Good morning, everyone. Working students. It's a pleasure to have you here. At FIU, I'm Elizabeth Béjar, and I have the honor of serving as the Provost and Chief Operating Officer.
Good morning, Prasant Mohapatra, Provost of USF.
Good morning, everybody. Mike Allen, president of Béjar University. My fun fact is I am the first president in our 82-year history to not be a nun. So it's a whole different kind of ceiling, I suppose.
And so as you can see, we've got this wonderful panel. And so I have to, full disclosure, I'm sort of biased in two areas. First, Provost Mohapatra is actually my boss's close colleague, so as I work at University of South Florida. And secondly, a little known fact, I am a Béjar University alumni. I graduated in 1996. So it's a real privilege for me to get a chance to talk to the president. On a topic that is very important to me. As Dr. Singer laid out, where we are when it comes to artificial intelligence, it's revolutionizing how we do business at all aspects of society. And if you think about it from a workforce perspective, you could look now. If you were to look last year at this time, if somebody were to tell you that they needed a prompt engineer, people would look at you. I don't know what that is. Now, you can go out there now and search on Indeed, and you'll find job listings for prompt engineer. And Microsoft, large technology firms are looking for these new jobs, which emerged seemingly out of nowhere. And then on the other side of it, you're talking about how this is going to impact not just how are we going to develop technical expertise in this field, but how do we create the workforce, not to put too light of a spin on it, it's basically we need the workforce of tomorrow today. Meaning if you graduate from a college or university this summer, odds are you're going to walk into a job and somebody's going to ask you, well, how do you utilize AI? How do you use it in your jobs? How can it make it better? Because I also think that there is a certain expectation, particularly of folks of my generation. You'll hear the term that they are, quote, digital natives, or that the younger generation know how to use these technologies by the virtue of they grow up in it, and argue that that's not the case. They just know that it's there and they mess around with it. So that leads into those thornier questions of the ethical use of it, the responsible use of it. Because if it's just, hey, we have AI, well, how do you use it? Well, I just turn it on and use it. Then you get into situations where we saw in some of the court cases where the attorneys were using generative AI to generate their briefs, and then it turns out after they submitted them, the precedents they were referencing weren't actually real precedents. So That said, that's kind of the situation as we look out into the future that these university leaders are staring off into the abyss. And so there are those that would say that this is moving fast and we're already behind. And then there are others in the same field that say, oh no, this is just like the internet, it's a passing fad, it's not going to happen. So they have to balance these unique challenges going forward. And so that's going to lead us into our discussion here. And so if you don't mind, Provost Béjar, as you're the host, we'll lead off with you, and kind of what I'll do, we'll start with some questions and let the discussion go where it is. But so I'll ask you this: what do you see higher education's role in preparing the workforce, for the impacts of artificial intelligence? I think both in general, but specifically in the technical field as well. So.
And so, thank you, and thank you, Dr. Singer, for your opening remarks. I think we'll certainly adapt and adjust to some of that commentary. That's critically important. So first off, we can kind of look at this in a very tactical way and kind of lead up to the strategic. We all, as educational leaders, have a responsibility to confirm and affirm the value proposition of higher education. So we do need to make sure that our graduates, our students, are getting those jobs. That's step one. Step two is they are becoming, those leaders. And that higher education, perhaps differently than previous revolutions, from agrarian to industrial, that higher education is at the table as opposed to being responsive, being proactive. Higher education, particularly in the United States, certainly more developed than it was years ago, centuries ago. And so we do really have an opportunity to look at our structures differently, to really be interdisciplinary, and to actually say, if the jobs of tomorrow don't exist today, then the students who walked across the stage last year, all of us had them and celebrated them, right? How do they adjust? So then it's not just about the specific skill, critically important for this moment, but the capacities and the capabilities to evolve and to kind of drive that. And I think that speaks to an interdisciplinary nature, and not just saying, I'm going to be a coder. I'm going to be a coder who understands principles of philosophy, humanities, policy, who can work with business, who can work with finance, who can work with healthcare, to really kind of delve deeply. I'm putting it really broadly, for all of us. And so, that is, as Peter said, an awesome responsibility, but it is ours. And the fact that we're sitting here, public, private, religious affiliated, we have to do things differently. And if we don't really, really collaborate, we're going to spend time on internal competition and we'll lose. And we know, and I want to thank, it's not a commercial, I'm not here to do that, but Cyber Florida is a really great example of the work that we can do across the state with government leaders, partnering with industry, partnering with NGOs, partnering with the military in really critical ways. So.
Yeah, on that same score, you mentioned the interdisciplinary and the multidisciplinary approach, and I'll throw it out to the group. That's been a word that's been thrown out for many years on all the fields, and I know it's easier said than done. And so how do your institutions work through that and pull that together? I know that I'm kind of going. People say, "Oh, you're going off script," but that's I'm
to be expected.
Yeah, that's kind of my nature, and there'll be a movie quote in here somewhere. But but no.
I think that's the question we're all trying to figure out, but I think that's where the lanes have shifted a little bit in a really positive way, right? We always traditionally have said we have computer science majors. We still do. They're the ones who are learning the AI. They're the ones who are going to lead us in the tech space. But where higher ed is going and where we need to be especially effective is tech's in the center. Tech is in the center. These skills are in the center, and then every discipline, every major, every program pulls from that. They pull from it in healthcare. They pull from it in education. They pull from it in business. That's how we prepare our graduates to be on the cutting edge of technology. That's how they become employable. And we know with AI, the entry-level jobs are going to go away, which means our graduates have to be ready for that next level job from us, from the day of graduation. So I think that's really the critical piece.
You know, for us at Miami-Dade College, we started with our faculty. You know, we felt like the first group that needs to know about AI and not be afraid of it and not begin to ban it and have those conversations. So think about fall of 2021, we had 500 of our faculty go through AI training and AI workshops. And in 2022, we put out $100,000 and said, we'll fund grants for faculty who use AI to enhance learning outcomes. By November of 22, ChatGPT comes out, and the Chronicle's front page in January of 23 is banning ChatGPT. And we weren't having that conversation at Miami-Dade College. We were not trying to build policy overnight to add ChatGPT to plagiarism and to having students dismissed from the college. And think about the rhetoric and conversations that many colleges and universities not ready had for the first part of 2023. You can't undo those conversations because what you've basically said is you've invalidated that AI is part of what we do every day. It's in the fabric of workforce. It's in the fabric of life. And by having the conversations about banning it, about plagiarism, about spending millions of dollars in software technologies to detect ChatGPT instead of spending millions of dollars in reinventing assessment. How do we know what we know? How will we assess students? How do we know that we've learned? Right? And I think that that's going to be the greatest crossroad for us. If we get that right, if we get assessment right, that it doesn't matter. Actually, part of a course should be that you used AI for your assignment. Actually, that needs to be it, because if not, it's not in the center. Right? Just like you use the English language as part of English 1101, we're going to need to do that. And our faculty, we're going to have to get creative about how we assess learning and how we assess knowledge so that it neutralizes. You would never, ever think of not sending a student to the library to do research. The research they do is someone else's work. You teach them to cite it. You wouldn't dream of not telling a student to go use Google to go find some information. They have to learn how to cite it and criticize it and apply it. And we have to do the same around AI platforms when they relate to any of our workforce programs, but more importantly, when they relate to learning.
This is really fascinating. So, Provost Mohapatra, I'm interested as you're talking about it as USF is they're now moved into AAU and leading on the research side of things. How do you see that playing into the overall preparing students and certainly tying into some of the discussion that we're hearing here about overall?
Yeah, let me get back to the point that Elizabeth brought up on interdisciplinary or multidisciplinary way of handling things. So we have, for the past 200 years, higher ed and universities are more targeted to a disciplinary learning provisioning approach. But if you think about it, interdisciplinary or multidisciplinary approaches are slowly becoming norms. And the reason for that is the challenges that we face, they need solution that needs expertise from multiple disciplines. You will not, let's say a tsunami is coming to Los Angeles or a hurricane to Miami, the hurricane will not pause for a while and think, okay, how much damage I should do for engineering, how much damage I should do on the psychology side and all that. So there is no distinction of disciplines in the challenges that we face. So we have to really focus on approaches that span across multiple disciplines and maybe newer disciplines. So in that context, at USF, there was an institute, I think it's been there for 10 years plus. I recently moved, so I don't have the exact date, but it's been there for a decade or so on AI plus X. And X is, put any discipline name over there. So we have about 30 faculty from several disciplines across the campus working on that institute in order to address challenges related to AI. And we are trying to ramp up that with all this generative AI getting into more prime areas. We are trying to ramp up all those activities in moving ahead, and you'll hear a lot more about those.
So on the school, as we talk about this moving forward, what are, and I'll throw it out to the group again, what are some of the, I mean, there's a lot of impediments. What do you all see as like the significant hurdles and challenges to get to this? I mean, it's, you know, I don't think there's anybody that would say that this isn't we're not moving in the right direction, but if, you know. So,
I think one, and you just touched upon it, Provost, it's the understanding of generative open AI and generative AI versus the use of AI in technology platforms and the way that we access healthcare, the way that it can be used unethically, and gathering people's information and programming algorithms that violate enormous amounts of data privacy. And I think people just don't understand those two paths. Generative AI is here. You're probably not going to put too much guardrails on that. It is going to be the better version of Google. It's going to summarize things. You're not probably going to get 10 or 15 links. This is the worst version of generative AI. It's only going to get better. It's only going to improve. That's the part that we're going to have to, like we do today. You know, if you ever go to the doctor and you get a diagnosis, what's the first thing the doctor tells you to do? Please don't go to Dr. Google. Please don't go to Dr. Google. It's the first thing they tell you. Give me a chance. Don't go to Dr. Google. Because there's so much information in there that your anxiety level may go up. You may be misinformed. So generative AI is going to help enhance Dr. Google in ways that we are just touching on the surface. I think we have to be about teaching for workforce is how are companies using AI? When you go and you interview for a job, what are you learning about that company's AI platforms? Everyone's using it. Amazon uses it every day. That's why if you buy a flashlight, it says others that bought these batteries. They're algorithms. So I think there are going to have to be some guideposts that are put and regulations that are put when you think about the private use of AI with patient care and other credit cards, financial data. I think when we think about cybersecurity, AI is going to be the greatest threat, but it's also going to be the greatest defense because it can produce machine learning much faster than anybody else, you know, looking at 25 screens and detecting a threat and then preventing an attack. So those are the policy conversations we have to have, because when I hear policymakers say, we're going to ban AI, no, you're not. What world are you living on? That train left the station. So let's start having a thoughtful conversation and not a reactive conversation to something that scares the daylights out of us.
And to that, I want to add to that thoughtful
And I put my
conversation.
sexy voice for you guys.
To that thoughtful conversation, one of the things and thrilled that there's government agencies here that we're focused on policy. You know, policy has traditionally, or in many cases, been an afterthought, and policy has to be at the forefront of this, because if you put up too many guardrails, then you limit innovation from people who are well-intentioned to move society forward with an ethical with ethics and integrity, and then the historically or new to us bad actors will emerge who don't have those guardrails or aren't respecting those guardrails. And so what that fine balance is, right, can't be determined only by policymakers, but really has to be involved in that interdisciplinary way to really kind of make that magic happen. And so I think that's going to be really the sweet spot, is really looking at how, we're not going to ban AI. I I don't have any today, but I know when I began my higher education career, some faculty chose not to adopt email because it was a passing fad. So why were we going to do that, right? And
the internet you couldn't access, from a college
And the
computer.
pandemic was going to last 2 weeks.
And the pandemic was going to last 2 weeks. Right? So here we are, and really thinking through how do we really frame this revolution in a way that is that history will judge higher education, industry, government, right, as an ability to work together. Some of those you asked kind of a teasing question, which is we may have to operationalize our internal incentives and our external incentives better so that we can actually spur collaboration and cooperation. You want to get things done, kind of do it with private industry faster. That's a historic, right? And you want to slow things down, do a multi-governmental agency initiative, right? Then you've got bureaucracy exponentially. And so how do we break through some of those internal barriers so that we can get the good folks that we really have to sit at the table and do the work that has to be done?
So let me share my personal thought and the biggest challenge for AI. I think it'll be really prudent to figure out ways to guiding it in the right path versus wrong path. If you abstract it out, artificial intelligence is based on data and information. Whatever is fed as data or information, the intelligence is derived out of that. If it is garbage in, there will be garbage out. So at the end of the day, we have to be careful that where it is learning the information. If you feed the internet everywhere that this is an elephant, anytime it sees a file folder, it will say that's an elephant. Okay? So as simple as that. So we have to really be careful and good AI versus bad AI, because with the advances, the uses and the applications will expand a lot. Along with that, the proliferation of bad entities to dilute the data or feed incorrect data will increase. So the security part have to go hand in hand in making AI work for the way we intend it to.
Absolutely. I think just an obvious statement, but it relates to higher ed, and to your direct question is the pace. The pace of this, right? Higher ed is notoriously slow, right? We're ocean liners, and industry is speedboats. And to all the industry leaders out here, the government leaders, know that we get it. Okay, we don't have that luxury anymore. We have to be ready to move. And it's daunting to think that a new student who just joins us is going to graduate in 4 years. What is AI, cyber, data science? What are these things going to look like in 4 years? We have no idea. You have no idea, and you know a lot more than us. So the formula is these partnerships. The formula is universities and colleges in the room with industry leaders saying, what do you need? How should we be teaching our students? What kind of skills do you need to see? That's always been the formula, but never so much as today. I almost view universities as like virtual annexes of these corporations, these tech companies, to say, what do you need? And to help fund us, we will help deliver you graduates. I think that's really a good formula.
Yeah, and but it comes at a time that you survey any American, 1 in 2 Americans believe there's no value in higher education. And that is scary, because everything is pointing to a much more knowledge economy. Could you imagine us having this conversation? It's a critical thinking conversation. It's a communication conversation. It's a moral compass ethics conversation. And that happens so much and gets developed in an interdisciplinary way every day in classrooms across colleges, universities in this country. And we are peddling a narrative in this country that college is not for everyone. And we're battling this idea that we can't even think that 60% of working age Americans should hold a post-secondary credential. That is not what other countries are doing. We are slowing down America's human capital by looking at bills that deregulate K-12, that don't look at standardizations and knowledge at a time that the world needs America to get it right, that needs the United States to get it right, because it is where we have fundamentally led. And I worry about, are we peddling a narrative to the next generation of leaders who are going to have to be the leaders of private and public and policymakers, saying, and you don't need to do anything beyond high school. You're good, we don't need college. And so I say that because I think we cannot have these conversations without having the conversation that says we must invest in human capital in order for us to keep up with the acceleration of AI to market, and the work and the future of work means that higher education not only needs to be a speedboat, not only has to rethink and reimagine the way that students learn and gather knowledge, because now there's other platforms that give you that knowledge in a faster way. But let's agree that in a knowledge economy, we need to produce more knowledge, and more learning needs to happen for us to be competitive and have the partnerships.
There's been a radical cultural shift. I felt it. There's a radical shift in higher ed, a willingness to change, a willingness to let companies that are here come in and say, this is what should be in your curriculum, right? And then actually putting that into action. And I think everybody should know that, because that's a big change for higher ed.
And I think you're seeing faculty
That's what I mean.
embrace that as well.
I mean, you always have heard for decades, and it's true, I know there's two provosts up here, but faculty own the curriculum. Yes, but no, right? The curriculum's for the students. The curriculum's to prepare our students, and we don't know enough. We don't know enough. It has to be a partnership.
So let me add a little bit of controversies here, just to make it exciting.
Yes.
So if you think about it, even if we prepare with all best intention to train our students in AI, cybersecurity, and everything today, who knows, as you said, who knows what will be there 4 years from now or 5 years from now. Whatever we will incorporate now may be not very valuable. But okay, let's not forget that universities forever have always trained students for jobs that don't exist. Jobs don't exist in that. If you think about your own experiences, many things that you have learned during your days at the universities, they change so rapidly that they are meaningless when you get into the job sector. So traditionally, universities have been doing or playing that role of preparing students for jobs that don't exist. How do we do it, and how should we do it more going forward? Is focus on more fundamental education, focus on making the students be more adaptable to lifelong learning, be more adaptable to creative thinking, be more adaptable to creative design thoughts, and kind of the fundamentals on which they will rely on throughout their their job career, by adapting to the changes that will happen. There are many changes that they will encounter during their entire professional life. If we make them ready for that, then that we will be more successful in providing the value of higher education.
And along that, so the theme, I think, is where we have to be quicker at adapting how do we, and what we're teaching. So it's interesting, we have a broad range here of the university system, state college system, and private. My work, through the state university system, it oftentimes is hard. Now, this is not the university, because the universities are trying to adapt, but it's the broader, the infrastructure around it is. It seems like to make changes is very difficult, in the sense of it's often hard to shift. You can't make. It seems like we need to make. I'll call it tectonic shifts, big shifts, but the system is only designed to make incremental shifts. So, that's. I'll be interested to hear the perspective, particularly across the gamut, from from a private university all the way through. So,
you're right. If you think about higher education, funding, and accreditation, the mechanisms that dictate the rules for higher education, they're antiquated. We provide, federal Pell Grant and scholarships if you're full-time, if you're this, on a semester basis, right? So some of the big policies, which are the guideposts that were put in place for higher education many moons ago, are still the same. And so those are antiquated. I think we have to work on continuing to change those policies at the policy level, but I think we have to ask ourselves, I ask our team every single day, how are we applying AI? How are we doing it? Because some of the things that slow down adoption are people. I always say, is it people, process, or policy? It's usually people. And so then how do you grab AI and the human skill experience of adopting curriculum, all the things that take this very longer process to go to market that you don't see in the private sector. You see it with FDA, you see it with other things. Is the possibility there? I think the possibility is there. I think it's happening. Would I say that it's happening at scale? No, but I think it's happening in innovative pockets of every college and university. I would say across the country, but I can tell you in Florida. Whether it's cybersecurity, whether it's been AI, whether it's increasing nursing by 40%. Here's a perfect example of using AI, using technology to increase the number of nurses. Simulation. You could not do simulated clinicals. Why? Because the Board of Nursing told you no. It took the pandemic for the Board of Nursing to say that simulated hospitals and clinicals were just as valuable as a student sitting in a hospital for 8 hours. Maybe you had a patient that had a cardiac arrest. Maybe you had a patient that was presenting stroke, versus now you can create this with virtual reality in a simulated space that the Board of Nursing says those count towards clinical hours. What else do we need to be doing and disrupting so that we really have applied learning to a strong foundation of academic skills? I think there are 3 skill sets that students have to leave our institutions with. The academic skill sets, which are foundational. And they are still, by the way, the #1 thing employers ask us for. Communication, critical thinking, reasoning, all those things that are in the foundational. I think the third are those employability skills, the soft skills, which are future-proof. Can you problem solve? Can you design, think? Can you work in a team? And I think the third skill set that now we have to make sure we integrate in every discipline are digital skills. Cybersecurity, do you know what phishing is? And it isn't on Biscayne Bay. 99% of attacks come through an employee who got phished, followed, and gave up their password. We should be committed to that every student that graduates knows they can't do that. #2, around digital skills, AI. And how can they use it in an ethical manner? And how can they apply it to have better patient outcomes, to have better customer care, so that they're prepared for the future of work? And I think it's integrating those in the entire experience that you get in learning.
So I want to echo, right, everything Madeline said and emphasize a few things. One, we have these conversations across the country in higher ed, but I will affirm that in Florida, public-private, right, we're in it. In South Florida, we are all committed to it, as evidenced by all the work that we've been doing. I think at the end of the day, Mike said, well, we have 2 provosts, 2 stodgy provosts.
You added the stuff.
Rulers. It was understood, right? And the role of the chief academic officer is changing. This is a change management process for all leaders in higher ed.
You guys are the guideposts.
We have to.
We appreciate it.
And the smart ones.
We certainly, thank you, but we have to embrace, right, that we cannot continue to do what we've always done.
Right.
And so we look at it, we are innovative, we're creative, we work with accreditation as a peer review process, so we have to engage our peers in finding their voice and speaking up to that change management and some of those historical paradigms that are strongly rooted in our country. We also create professors of practice and industry folks in residence to be able to engage, right, in a lot of these skills and a lot of the work that we're doing. The faculty don't have terminal degrees in. It's not even possible at the rate and the pace and the acceleration of our change. We have to work through and understanding that change management process, creating an environment where our faculty feel comfortable partnering with industry, not being responsive to industry, but really partnering with industry together to say, let's create this knowledge, let's disseminate it, let's work on this together, is a mind shift.
Yeah. If I can add one quick thing in there, this notion about AI will take over all the jobs, or the jobs will go away because of AI. It's not that. It's people with the knowledge of AI will replace people who don't have any knowledge about AI. That might happen, so we should be aware of that in training our students of the future to learn the fundamentals and how they can use and adapt to it.
You're so right. Someone just said to me, I'm doing multiple jobs, but I only get paid for one job. Mike, are you doing multiple tasks that make up one job? Let me reframe that. You're not doing multiple jobs. You're now doing multiple tasks that actually make up that one job you have.
That's
You can't,
Right?
you can't help but feel a little schizophrenic when you hear what everybody says, because on the one hand, Madeline's right. Higher ed's in crisis. If you're running a company and half of your customers don't believe your company offers value or your product is valuable, you have a major problem. But the flip side of that is, I've never been more optimistic about higher education. I've never been more energized by where we're going as an industry in terms of educating students, and it's because of what Elizabeth said. And the folks who have occupied her positions for decades, and mine and others, have not thought that way. And you see it across the board, and sometimes it takes a crisis and a crisis in confidence from the people who entrust you, our students, to really bring that out in people. But you're seeing that across all of our campuses, private, public, colleges, everything. It's fun to see.
So,
Did you hit all your questions?
I did. So we're in the kind of the free for all here.
I feel like we derailed your.
No, it's listen. But that's the whole point of this. This is kind of how I was hoping this would go. And I guess so. We got a little bit of time left. So I guess what I'd like to do is, kind of give each one of you to give your, if you had one or two things you wanted to, that you haven't already said, that you want to get out there as far as higher education, AI. What's next? Or it's not even, it's what now is probably a better way to put it, because it's here. So I'll just start with you, President.
I would just say it's the beginning of just something special around all industries and vectors, and the way that we work and the way that we play and learn in a space that is around not just artificial intelligence, but just technology, everything that we have at our fingertips. So I think for us, it's packaging the right way. So I think at the college, that's why we've built stackable credentials. You know what? The average age of students in our AI class right now is 44. It's 44. It's all of us. And you know what? It's not online and independent and alone. No, they're together. They want to have these conversations. They're curious. And that should give us enormous optimism that we are a curious society, that we want to continue to learn. And so that's inherent, I think, in America's DNA, and it's inherent in this community, at least here, and I think across our state. So how do you stack credentials? Come in and get a certificate, then go to an associate's, then a bachelor's, and build the partnerships. I think that as we repackage the delivery of knowledge with all of these platforms, it's an exciting time. It's an exciting time to be educating. It's an exciting time to think about innovation. And there is probably no greater time to be a student, because the possibilities really are endless. You can come in and create something today. You don't have to wait. You can create something. And I think every college or university has an entrepreneurship place, has a place where students can come in and with a white canvas. And I think that should excite us. and I think will rise to the moment. Not only academia will rise to the moment, I think that business and industry will rise to the moment, but most importantly, I think America will rise to the moment.
So certainly, I'm just as optimistic as Madeline, and I think I have two things. One is I'm really bullish on Miami, on South Florida. We all have options. We all have things. You're close. You're in South Florida. We'll figure it out.
In the name.
You know, I was going to say, I'm bullish on Miami, but I was like, I got to be,
we got to
got our
be
friends.
But
Bullish,
bullish,
USF.
bullish,
Yeah.
bullish.
Yeah.
Got it. See, I did that for you. Bullish. No, certainly bullish on Miami. Bullish on South Florida. Bullish on Florida. Right. There are many things that we can read headlines, but Florida is getting a lot right, and the respect and the admiration. And the value proposition of what's happening across education in Florida, both public and private and based with industry, right, is beginning to stem the tide. And when we look at data nationally, it's like, oh, but for Florida, oh, but for Florida. And I think we need to honor that and speak to that. The other, and then we kind of sit back and say, I'm going to be optimistic, but well, let's all remember that it's because we're educated folks who are curious, is that the human condition means regression to the mean is real. And so this work, the work that Peter's doing in New America, the work that Cyber Florida is doing, right, the work that Cyber at FIU is doing, we have to stay on top of it. We have to really have, right, our foot on the gas pedal, because otherwise we will step back and regression to the mean, and we go back to our old places, and we go back to the offices where they feel familiar, and our faculty continue to do the things they've always done. And we have a lot to continue to do. And we have, asterisk, the big pandemic, right? Which is, we aren't really where we should have been or where we would have predicted to have been in 2018, 2019 because of the pandemic. And we acknowledge that there's learning loss, there's learning differentiation. You don't want to say loss, the data will tell us it's loss, and we need to own it. And say, what are we going to do about it? Not just be like, oh, well, there's loss, there's nothing we can do. No, we absolutely are the people who can do something about that. And we can accelerate it. We know what those mechanisms are. And if not, we'll invent the mechanisms that need to be. So we really need to, right, understand that we're in a time and a place where the dynamism that we have to have and the rate and the pace of our work has to be multiple tasks exponentially simultaneously to be able to meet the moment and exceed expectations.
So last year when I was moving to USF, I had that question in my mind, why is it called University of South Florida? It's not in South Florida. So I did ask ChatGPT about that, and the ChatGPT explained it to me.
I'll give you the real answer. I learned it.
So going back, if you go a long time back, when calculators were first invented, there was news in the headlines that, okay, we don't need to teach maths anymore to school children there because this is going to change everything. Didn't happen. At some point, people thought, Google MD, okay, why do you need doctors anymore? It didn't change anything. With ChatGPT, now the question is, do you need higher education? Because ChatGPT can answer all the questions. No, it's not going to do all that. Let me make this prediction. AI or ChatGPT will not be the biggest invention or discovery of our lifetime. We will see something even much more impactful as we move forward, even in our lifetime. So this is just, one of the transition and hype we go through. And the part, and this might sound weird to you, the pandemic actually accelerated all this. We had a technological leap by 3 years because of the pandemic, and we were not prepared for that. So we have to do a little bit of catch up in order to, mend through that gap, which was not a, transitional increase, but a leap or a jump in there. So I am like Mike said, I'm very optimistic about higher education. And it's actually a fact. If you take survey that people are losing trust or faith in higher education. So we need to figure out ways in which we establish that trust. The reality is there, but the perception is not there. We have to really figure out to gain that trust back, to make impact to the social life of people on a daily basis, and rather than getting carried away with the hypes.
Peter talked about the unintended consequences, and it feels like very clearly there's a reckoning coming. There's a tipping point of these things, and turning those in the right direction really feels like a critical juncture for us, right? Unemployment. We know it's coming because of this. 45% of healthcare is going to be automated. We need to upskill, reskill. Okay, we need to retrain people so that they stay employed, so that they can get better jobs. Inequality, right? Is this going to drive the income gap even greater, even deeper? It could, if we're not careful. But there's an opportunity here, an incredible opportunity about access. Access to education, access to learning, affordable access to healthcare. Right? If we move in the right direction in all of these things, we can make monumental change in a positive direction. But I think it's going to really take an intentional effort to do that.
So we're kind of coming to the end. This is one last question. I'm not sure how it's going to land, but I have to have a movie reference in it. So movie that just watched recently, fantastic film, I thought anyway, Oppenheimer. So do we think we had a Trinity test moment for AI yet? No.
No.
No?
No.
Okay, I think it's coming.
No, but
Or do you think it's going to be something, is it like that? Are we going to have that big moment in the New Mexico desert which unleashes this, or is it going to be more of an incremental over time?
I think, so Facebook. Do you guys remember when Facebook came out? Oh my God, connecting with the high school sweethearts connecting, right? You know? And then came Instagram and came Twitter and came all of the platforms. Only thing I would say is, what can we learn from what we got right and what we didn't get so right in social media? And so the reality today, if we think about the social problems or issues that arise from social media, right? You now have like laws coming in to ban social media, and parents can only give permission if you're under 14 years old. How did we get here? How did we get to a point where social media had an impact on elections? How social media has had an impact on certainly elections outside of the United States? How can we learn from oh my God, that's a platform to connect with your high school friends? What can we learn from? What guideposts can we put in early so that we're not reacting to whatever that moment in the desert is? Yeah. And I think there's an opportunity there for us.
I think that's an interesting question, and I was having a similar discussion with someone that exactly on the same issue, that once upon a time Facebook was everything. Now, if you have teenage kids or school-going children, they don't get into Facebook anymore. What changed it? There were distractions. Instagram and other things came into picture. So, once we get saturated with or once we get bombarded with the technology, the way to, move the society into not getting into trouble by using that is to create another distraction in order to move them to something else. So I think, slowly, I'm predicting blindly that with AI, we will make several good advances, but again, there will be always a bad side of AI. That will be the distraction to put the check gates in there and using it more kind of reliably and more in a judicious manner.
Well, all right. So Randy he says, he's giving me the pseudo hook, but we'll be good enough. So anyway, listen, I want to thank you all for participating in this. This has been very insightful and a wonderful conversation. Thank you all again very much. Thanks everybody in the group for attending.
Thank you.
The one thing I do get to say is The best part of my job is that I get to associate, talk with, and hang out with some really very, very smart people. And this is, again, for me personally, thank you again for this opportunity. So,
Thank you.
oh, a photo.
And while the presidents and provosts take a photo, we'll be transitioning to a short break. We will return from that break in 5 minutes. So move around a bit, interact a bit, network a bit. We'll resume in 5 minutes.